duty, honor, privilege.
Most people are quick to throw around the term hero when they refer to our military veterans, but the reality is they aren't always treated that way.
There were many documented incidents where Marines and other soldiers returned from overseas and, according to one of my Mafia pointers, couldn't get a Pepsi, couldn't get a sandwich, but yet they saw German prisoners of war being served in these restaurants that they couldn't go to.
Many veterans, especially our veterans of color, have historically been both overlooked and in some cases blatantly oppressed.
I was always told which places to go and which places you didn't. So there was kind of sort of a roadmap to avoid racism or to mitigate it. And I had help trying to navigate it, but it was inescapable.
Fighting to defend a country abroad that often disrespected them at home.
Even in uniform. I had a bus driver tell me, I don't give a damn about that uniform. You do what you're supposed to do down here, you know. He said uniform didn't mean anything to him.
As I got to the door of the bus driver looked at me and he said, I don't take Marines, dogs, and he closed that door and drove off. I'm standing there in the nation's capital, in uniform.
Leaving them facing what many would call a dual fight for freedom.
And I thought that I was in a relationship with an institution or government or country or unions that would actually fulfill their end of the bargain and provide for me what I provided for it and so many other people who have served this country honorably.
Black military veterans represent such a large and diverse group. I'm Bill Anderson, and during Black History Month, we decided to sit down with some of these individuals to better understand their experiences. We sat down with people from different generations, different organizations, to all tell their story.
You had to go into the service at that time. It was a requirement. And I like to think it was duty, honor, privilege.
January of '44, they sent me I went to Tuskegee and started the flight through the flight program there, which took about a year.
Dr. Richardson and Sergeant Wilcox represent history dating all the way back to the 40s and Tuskegee Airmen, along with the Montford Point Marines, the first Black Marine training facility.
And the Montford Point Marines represent those first African-American Marines that were allowed to come in the Marine Corps in 1942 as a result of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Executive Order 8802.
Master Gunnery Sergeant Geeter served years after.
Well, I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 18 out of the south side of Chicago. I received my recruit training at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, California. I thought I was only going to be around for 2 or 3 years just to get out of Chicago and find a better life. But I found a better life in the Marine Corps.
And Bill Cobb and Sean Wilson represent experiences in the Air Force and Army, among other areas of service.
I served in the military during Operation Desert Storm in 1990 and 1991. I went away to the Air Force as a reservist, as a medic, thinking that I would actually just go ahead, get trained, and serve 1 week in a month. And a war broke out. And my life was changed forever as a result.
I experienced racism as a United States Army intelligence cadet. I experienced it after serving in the military. I experienced it as a corrections officer in the Pennsylvania State Corrections while I served at State Correctional Institution at Graterford. And after jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire and joining the Philadelphia Police Department, I have experienced racism in the ranks in the Philadelphia Police Department as well.
And that racism that Sean began to describe is part of the conflict we're exploring. Black veterans who were committed to serving their country but found out pretty quickly that they could be fighting battles on and off the battlefield.
I was originally scheduled to be a radio repair person because my aptitude, my test scores were good, so I went to a pretty cool electronics school in Southern California. But I experienced racism from everybody to include the instructors. And it got to the point where it was almost unbearable, and they were trying to guide me to go into the infantry. They just wanted to get rid of blacks in the class.
Having to go, being forced to go to the back of the bus driver had a crank. You know, in those days, you had a crank, you cranked the angle, he had a crank. If I didn't get to the back of the bus, you know, call the cops and perhaps use the crank. But that was the worst I had.
Even in uniform?
Even in uniform.
Initially in training, all my fears came true. From basic training, being called racist names, from being treated differently and unfairly. And so I just felt like I needed to survive that, like it was an initiation of sorts.
The stories may be shocking to some, or fairly common to others, but they're eye-opening when you remember again that these men were experiencing this all for the right to possibly risk their lives for their country.
And I got a 3-day pass, and I went up to Washington, D.C. on the bus, of course. And on the return, buses are lined up, heading south. And as I got to the door of the bus driver looked at me, and he said, "I don't take Marines, dogs," and closed that door and drove off. I'm standing there in the nation's capital, in uniform.
And I asked, what was the reason why guys always wait, to come into the shower when I go into the shower. And what they said to me, and it was one person in particular who was able, and I was glad he did that, he said, "It's no disrespect to you, Wilson, but we were always told that you guys had tails."
Somebody said that to you.
What's interesting is that almost to a man, these veterans, and yes, black heroes, still believe that what they experienced, it was worth it.
To me, it's important for people to know that so that we can sort of get rid of the stereotype that exists about people with brown skin.
That's my take on that. That's my take on life. Like I say, duty, honor, privilege.
Now you've met them and heard some of their stories, but coming up, why was service even worth a dual fight for freedom?
Wanting to belong, wanting to lead, wanting to matter.
Now, the challenges of being black in the military during times of division and discrimination, they're pretty well documented, and yet and still these individuals pressed on. So the question becomes, why? Why was it all worth it to them?
The way I was raised.
Okay.
Respect others, no matter what.
I didn't go full-time because I was hyper-aware of the difficulties that black men and women had in serving our United States government, but I was also hyper-aware of my chances of actually surviving and living and thriving without actually leaving the city and finding a way to get a skill set that would help me actually provide for myself and be an asset to the community.
It's to serve your country. And you must realize there may come a time when we say in the service that bubble may go up, and you may be called to go to a faraway place to defend our freedoms. And if you're not ready to do that, then you're not ready to serve.
They did it for different reasons. For some, it was just their character. For others, it was the opportunity for a better life. Some just had the passion to serve. But whatever it was, the drive was strong. So they often made history without even knowing it.
I wanted to fly, and I said, oh, well, here's a chance to fly. The war's on, and the people are out there actually being trained at Tuskegee to fly. So here's my chance. The flying program with blacks was actually an experiment to see whether black men could be pilots or not. And we were anxious to make this a positive experience.
Many Tuskegee airmen like Dr. Richardson just wanted to fly, and to do that in a world that doubted them, they had to excel. Being a Montford Point Marine was a similar experience.
So what would have happened?
I just stayed on base.
What would have happened if you went to the other side of the track?
Well, you just didn't go to the other side of the track.
Okay.
I mean, you knew better.
Okay. Even in uniform, even as a part of the military?
Didn't matter. Didn't matter.
Society as a whole wasn't accepting of racial differences, but these men pushed on, knowing what they were walking into and even finding the strength to laugh through some of the pain.
At that time, the world was not especially kind to people of color.
That's such a nice way to put that.
You're right? Not especially
very
kind.
pleasant.
Now be clear, I don't want to paint a rosy picture of individuals who were completely selfless and happy in the face of racism. That's just not realistic.
I'd always felt conflicted, like I didn't want to go into the Air Force, but I didn't go directly into college. And so for me, it was an opportunity to just still escape the neighborhood, community, and the lack of opportunities.
But that's actually what I think made and makes these men heroes. They knew the obstacles, faced the obstacles, and found a reason to keep moving forward.
Wanting to belong, wanting to lead, you know, wanting to matter.
Did it ever bother you that you're there, you're a pilot, you're serving your country, but you can't even go into town?
But you're afraid to go into town. And that was a little unsettling. And you had to sort of wonder, what's wrong with these dumb people down here? I'm down here to protect them, and they're treating me like, like I don't know what.
Positive experience in the military?
Not always, not always. I smile because I realized how fortunate I was. You got to remember, the Marine Corps, when I came in 1976, was still, had a lot of social issues. Nowhere near the issues that the Mafia pointers had to endure 30 years earlier, but they were still there because America still had them.
And so they served. They served because they wanted to. They served because they needed to. They served to escape society. They served to change society. They served as they were told they didn't belong in society. They served.
We have served our nation because our desire to help people is probably the biggest thing in our lives. And just because we are no longer serving doesn't mean, in our uniforms, doesn't mean that we are not still ready, willing, and able to serve community better than any other citizens among us.
Those are your 3 Ds: dream, desire, discipline. And with those 3 things, you take your natural talents and make a good life for yourself and your family.
So you're not a
No.
hero?
Huh?
So you're not a hero? You're
No,
not accepting that?
No, I don't accept that.
Right.
You do your job. You know, you hang in there and you do your job. You persevere. You just hang in there and do it.
Now, the same people who are often called heroes now were called anything but that years ago. Coming up, how much have things really changed for our black veterans as they face their dual fight for freedom?
If you don't understand your history or know your history, you're destined to repeat it. So you got to know how we got here.
So now we have a little bit better understanding of what these veterans and others like them have faced over time. But is it ancient history or still recent history? And how much truly has changed?
Well, now that people know, adulation, glad to meet us, happy we served, proud of the service we gave. But until that point, just another brown-skinned guy walking around, that's all.
How much progress people of color serving in the military have made, it seems extremely subjective based on who, where, and when.
There were many documented incidents where Marines and other soldiers returned from overseas and, according to one of my Mafia pointers, couldn't get a Pepsi, couldn't get a sandwich, but yet they saw German prisoners of war being served in these restaurants that they couldn't go to.
But these same individuals, they've actually lived through the progress.
And I'm eternally thankful for the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, James Amos, who made sure this history was taught not only in Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, and Parris Island, bases these Marines were not allowed to go to, but the Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia. So now it's part of their curriculum.
But that's the thing with progress. It can be largely impactful to some and seem completely non-impactful to others.
When people think about those of us who serve in the military, the institution itself has a code of honor, but individuals are formed from their lived experiences and where they come from, and just because you go through a training doesn't mean that it washes away the things that were there prior to.
Honest, objective discussions with our vets showed that most really do think that things have changed, at least some. Sean Wilson's Vets in the Hood organization is helping to facilitate that change for military veterans and first responders across the board.
From a first responder, and someone who really runs to danger when everyone else is running from it, it hits a little different. you know, as a veteran. It hits a little different, and it makes me want to more unify, because I know the kind of hurts that come from service.
Joe Geter wants to fill a similar role for the next generation that those before filled for him.
If it weren't for the Mafia Pointers, even though I received some tough treatment early on, they endured much more. If it wasn't for what they endured, I could not be.
And of course, Dr. Richardson and the Tuskegee Airmen, finally, with few remaining, have been able to see and embrace the impact that they made.
I came out of service in '46. They were not hiring guys with brown skin to be airline pilots. Well, my son, in April, my son retired as a captain for American Airlines. Now, that happened as a result of men with brown skin being pilots during World War II.
So yes, they often face struggles, but through those struggles, let us not forget that they created change for the rest of us.
When I would go home to Chicago on leave, I wouldn't bring my uniform in the 70s and the 80s because I knew just wearing it incited a lot of deep feelings in other people, so I would never bring it home. After 1990, I never took it off because people would come up to me and say something simple as "thank you for your service." And while that may sound cliche-ish, that's all us veterans want to hear. Thank you.
Now, some of the same veterans who have been called unspeakable names and faced unimaginable treatment are now called heroes. But do they think they deserve that title? And what are their hopes for the future?
Do you feel like you're a hero?
No, heavens no.
But do you realize that other people think you are?
Yeah, I've been told that.
We hope it breaks down stereotypes. We hope that it gives people the impression, well, see, what the standard impression is that people of dark skin had, small brains, lack of intelligence, lack of all kinds of attributes.
They all have different backgrounds, but part of their importance is to make sure we recognize how much society has changed because of the sacrifices of these often overlooked black veterans.
And at the Officer Candidate School, they have a Mafia Point Marine run where they have a physical endurance test where they run through obstacles and run through trails, and periodically they stop on these trails and learn some of the history of Mafia Point.
Sometimes change occurs because we finally recognize how we treat each other.
Veterans are killing themselves at a rate which nobody's paying attention to. And it's because our needs have been neglected for generations. And the accumulated impact on that has devastated our communities.
And black veterans' sacrifices being documented and shared, it continues to inspire us all to be better.
Hopefully and prayerfully in 21, we have started the beginning of a rites of passage, you know, to show little black boys and little black girls and little brown girls and little black brown girls, you know, little white, red, yellow, doesn't matter. As a first responder, you have to love. We believe in love.
So for those who think their sacrifices have been ignored or have not led to progress, we acknowledge you.
And the Korean War was the first time that African American Marines and white Marines served side by side in combat. And we have one of those Marines, Sergeant Henry Wilcox, who is an original Mafia Point Marine who actually led a platoon in combat in Korea, where he was the only African American Marine in that platoon.
We are inspired by you, and we forever appreciate you.
Never could have done it without the Tuskegee Airmen experience.
Now, most of the veterans we spoke to said that they recognize that service is about sacrifice. So even though they may have been treated horrifically, they recognize that their dual fight for freedom, it paved the way for others. And for that, we are eternally grateful. I'm Bill Anderson. On behalf of everyone who helped put this special together, thanks so much for watching and have a good one.